So I have a couple of ways that I propose to people, and often it's only one of these that'll work for everyone, so I try to give them a few options. So option one is if you're like me and you're more of a speaker, I absolutely encourage people to record everything that they're talking about so that then they can find in there, based on what was responded to, what resonated with their audience, they can find in there what they're naturally saying about it anyway, if writing isn't their natural form. The second thing I recommend is if you're a coach, for example, or if you're just frequently informally coaching people in your topic area, then the best thing to do would be to record those. Or remember at the end to take a few notes. Like, what were the 3 or 4 things that I said to this person? What were the 3 or 4 questions that they asked? Questions are very juicy, whether it's in a speaking or whether it's a coaching setting, because that is often the question that one person has, of course, is the question that many people have. And so that's the second way. The third way is if you have any kind of an email list or if you have any kind of a following to ask people what their questions are. So I just got one of these yesterday from a list I'm a part of, and the woman, she said, I want to know, and then she just provided one question, and it was a juicy question, and then we all put in whatever we're thinking about or whatever, and now she can use that to extract for content in her particular area, and I think that's a tactic that's being used pretty frequently. So I think those 3 models. The fourth is I actually have gatherings now of my clients. I'll be doing one on Friday as well. And I get them to ask each other questions. Like if for the first time you've heard my topic area is X, what are the first 5 questions that come to mind for you? So going and having a couple of buddies sit down with you who are not super familiar with your topic area and actually saying, here's what I write about, here's what I think a lot about it. And then they go, well, is that this or is that that? People will naturally come to you with the questions. The last one that I come up with is that I tend to like to tie things to something that I already know or something that I'm newly finding out about. So for example, I'm writing a piece right now that I've been working on for a little while. I've taken up a new sport in archery, which of course is not typical for someone to do, but everything I'm learning in archery, actually, I'm finding ties to thought leadership, or maybe because everything in my life ties to thought leadership. So I'm doing this fun sort of mashup of archery and thought leadership. So thinking about something you think a lot about, for me, theater is another one I've done this with, thinking about something you know a lot about and then tying it to your topic, because you're so passionate about your sport or you love to cook or whatever, that often you can find that fun overlap, and it's so unexpected that people tend to read those. So anyway, those are all a bunch of different ideas.
Okay. And when it comes to executing on those, have you worked with clients who got bogged down and then got stuck? And what advice did you have for them in terms of
It's so many of us. We all get stuck. I mean, I wish it was just one or two clients. I was just with one of my clients yesterday, and he's really bogged down. And so for me, as soon as I get bogged down with a client, the first thing we do is we go back to basics. Back to basic is looking at our audience. That to me is the first thing. If we are just going all over the place, have we really gone and dug deeply into our understanding what it is our audience needs versus what we want to write about? And I think that helps. I think the second thing that we do is we start to think about the long-term impact. So for example, let's use him as an example. This is a guy who is an innovator himself, and he works right now he's got a year-long engagement working in a library system in the East Bay. And he's writing a series of articles about the innovation practices that he's inculcating into this library. But to him, that's kind of not going to lead him to the next thing. And so that's where we went immediately. First, we started talking more about the audiences and decided his audience that he really wants to be speaking to is organizational or corporate innovators. So it's not just people in libraries. We had to kind of step up a step. But then secondly, we had to think ahead and say, if in a year from now, he had a body of work, what does he want it to do for him?
I see.
Right? So for him, he wants a job. He wants his next job to come out of this. Well, then he can't be talking to a group of people that's this tiny, right? He has to get bigger. So if we're going to imagine that at the end, he wants a corporate innovator job, or he wants to be investing in corporate innovators, one of those two, which is kind of what he came to yesterday, and we're going to narrow it further, but if those are the two audiences, and we really can think, okay, strategically, what would you need to be talking about in your pieces over the next year in order for those people to have a sense that you actually have something unique and something worth saying, and having
Excellent. Yeah. So let that soak in for a second. Yeah. Then just this week, I think that's where we can distinguish, let's say, regular writing or writing with more of an advertising overtone versus thought leadership writing. Just this week, I got a briefing from a large pharmaceuticals company saying they wanted a thought leadership piece, and it should be visionary, and and should address scientists and explain this new technology platform that, by the way, isn't yet available. And then it addresses this and this disease, and the people know I'm not a science journalist. They asked me to do it anyway because I'm not a science journalist, and I explained all the various problems that we're going to have based on that information. I had no interview and couldn't get one. And basically, I had to try to make a technology seem very successful and sexy, although it's still in the lab. And I had to do this without, speaking to the researchers. And I haven't done it. I haven't accepted the assignment, but it's not going to be thought leadership the way it's set up that way. It's not going to be thought leadership writing because it doesn't answer a need. It's not a service article. And as I am writing my manuscript and developing my materials, that is one main point I make, is it has to impart your wisdom, meet this need. And so I like that, the way you consider the audience's needs, but also that the need of the thought leader for reaching the next step and reaching the audience goals. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Boy, that would be that sounds like an impossible. That sounds like marketing and sales copy more than it sounds like thought leadership to me.
Yeah, but it was, that phrase in the briefing, and frustrating. And hopefully they'll take my pushback and say, it's not what you're expecting, right? That's not what it's going to be. Right. So,
but let's just take that for just one more minute. What I find really interesting about that is it sums up a lot of what companies are doing right now, is that they're thinking that everything is thought leadership. The reason they want thought leadership over marketing and sales is, for some reason, it's equated with making them sound smart. And I'm all for sounding smart, but if it doesn't do those other things, and so I think that's the challenge. People have sort of downgraded the sense of the importance of marketing copy, and there is importance of marketing copy, and especially as something like this, I worked in speech recognition and technology that wasn't coming out for 5 or so years, and I worked in product and business development, but I worked a lot with the marketing team. And how do you think about this in the world of something of the future? You can write a futurist article, I think, which is related to thought leadership, but it isn't going to, and make it seem like you've got something to say and you've got a point of view and all of those things, but it's not quite the same thing. So I think it's a very interesting, even how you differentiate that in your book is helping people to see, what category things fall in, and when you want to be focusing on, when is thought leadership possible in a company? When is thought leadership matter? And why would somebody want to do a thought leadership article versus a futurist article or a marketing article? I think you could have some fun with that in your book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've come up with different categories for the different types of articles: the myth-busting article, the 5 best practices article, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that many times what I'm coming up against and what I'm working with my clients in is finding the right angle as an adjacent story. So you cannot say, again, that digital is here to stay and we need your company needs a digital transformation. That is no longer a story, right? But we need to hear that in very nuanced ways and specific ways, and you have to find an adjacent point. So this is one of my key ideas that I'm developing. I'm not exactly sure where I got it. I know you're using the word adjacent in your book. Are you familiar with this book here, Thought Leaders Practice? This one by Matt.
Of course.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. So
he's the longest guy. I mean, he was the only one who was in this before me. I mean, he's been around doing this concept and construct, although he's much more about how do you make money with thought leadership than I am.
Yeah.
But, you know, he's very well respected, very smart guy.
Yeah. And this one, I had to order it deep out of the Amazon archives, have my mom repackage it in Texas and send it to me here in Germany. And this one became before this one. And this is very
That was his first.
Yeah, this is very good. I don't know why it's not still out widely available. This one is very dense. I
have to admit, I haven't read the second one. I mean, I haven't read that little one. I have the first one, I believe.
Yeah, you can see that it leads up. It's the basis for the green one, and yeah, I really appreciate his because the tips he gives on developing a practice are really great. But I think I got to that straight off to that point to saying that somewhere in my journey I was able to articulate that it's adjacent stories is the key point, right? That because you.
Yeah, no, I think you're building on my idea. That's a new way of looking at the adjacent, and I think you're right. I think there is I'm sure we all have something to learn from that. So thank you.
Yeah. And anything else you'd like to talk about related to writing? And then other than that, I would use the rest of the time to hear about where your business is going. I noticed you have coaching sessions now and so on. So, but anything else on writing that you think is important to? I
think the main thing about writing is to let go of that itty bitty shitty committee that I talk about, right? I mean, that perfectionism. I was just, I've been teaching a class at Stanford, and my co-instructor and I were meeting yesterday. He's got a new job, and so we were just talking about, but he's got a new book coming out, and he had to turn it in like a few weeks ago for the first time, or for the final time, and he's going to I think he gets one more round at drafts, and it's so painful for him to turn this book in, and I was commiserating with him, and I think for both of us, it's this sense of, this sense that perfectionism is never possible. And he said his editor finally had to say, all those changes you want to make, those go in your next book, right? Because if you never put it to bed, if you never put it out in the world, what was the point? And I've seen too many people in that perfectionism mode. And it just makes me so sad, honestly, that we get ourselves so caught up in that bar going higher and higher and higher and thinking it's just never good enough, that it just holds back so much opportunity for people to learn from us. Alternatively, there's a woman I've known for many years who told me that she'd written her book in like 3 weeks. And I think that also makes me sad, right? Because, there is a sense that we must put our best foot forward. We must do the hard work, which is to honor our audience by thinking more deeply than just the first thoughts off our head. And so I think there's that struggle with where is the middle ground between that super high bar and that, just kind of throwing schlep out there just because I want to say I have a book, that I'm troubled by, either we're too hard on ourselves or we're too easy on ourselves. So where do we get that middle ground? And I think the only way is by having some colleagues, like a developmental editor, or having somebody who you trust, who can be that person to read your book for you, et cetera. So I think that is, or read your articles too. And you need a cheerleader, but you also need the editor. And so I think we think of this as a solo sport. And I don't think writing is a solo sport. We need help.
I like that. Yeah. I remember in one of the videos or podcasts I watched that you have contact with a woman who is now teaching people opinion writing, right?
Yes, the OpEd Project.
Yes. I'm actually curious about that. When I heard about that, I was like, what is that? Can you tell me a little bit more about her journey and what she's doing? I wasn't able to find her. I tried to Google her based on the tips I got, or I don't think I found her.
So if you look for OpEd Project, I think it's theopedproject.org or something is their website. Mm-hmm. So her background is she was a journalist and then also had a book, and she was really struggling with this notion that she discovered, which was that so few people on the opinion pages were actually women. And so she created this course that now is all across the US. I don't know if they do it globally, but I've taken it, I think, 3 times. My best friend is actually just going to go take it this weekend, so it's funny you bring it up. But it is a 1-day training, and she now trains other trainers who do the training as well. And the idea is, first of all, to own the fact that your opinion matters. And I think that's, if you come away with that only from the first time you take the class, it's good, because I think a lot of us think we're not experts enough, we don't have anything new to say, you know, all that same itty bitty committee there is showing up. But then secondly, it's understanding what you're an expert about, and it can be very surprising for people to realize that we're experts in a lot of different things, whether it's, for some people, surviving a difficult marriage, whether it's having, you know, been the first one in your family to go to college. I mean, there's a lot of things that you could be an expert in beyond just your niche of area of expertise. And I think the third thing that it does is actually talks through what are the elements of a good op-ed. And often it is the same thing as any journalist would know about the importance of having a hook, the importance of having a set of cogent points, but then most important, and I think more about this as I go along, also having the to be sure piece, which is honoring and respecting the other person where they are today versus belittling and denigrating those who disagree with us. And I think in today's era in the United States of political discourse, we've sort of lost that to be sure sense that it's important to respect and honor the person as to where they are. Otherwise, they will never change their mind. And so they sort of walk through and teach all of those, and then also give you an opportunity to do some constructive conversation with others in the room to start thinking about and digging in as to what your construct and what your op-ed might be about. And then they afterwards, if you write a piece, they have a set of folks who are editors, and they actually have them willing to review and modify your piece. And even if it's really good, they would help you get it into the New York Times or the Washington Post or whatever.
Wow, great project. And you helped her get rolling in that area of thought leadership on opinion writing, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I think I did it. I had a small role. She's a very smart gal. When I first met her, it was very early, and we were just trying to help her get off the ground. Like, how do you grow this beyond just being the one person running around the country, and help sort of brainstorm some ideas. And I'm sure she did it far beyond just her work with me. But she also has now sensibly gone into universities, and she's got a whole team of people who work in places like Stanford and Northwestern to actually work in conjunction with one of their expert faculty, usually people who are not yet authors, and helping them to start authoring more content in the world and understanding how to shape a point of view. And I think that's where they make their money, because I don't think they make a whole lot of these weekend workshops, which they charge very little for. But it's really where their heart is.
Great. Yeah. Okay. So Denise, what are you working on these days, and what are you developing right now?
So what I've been focused on for the last couple of years is developing content with LinkedIn Learning. So my first LinkedIn Learning course came out, I don't know, now it's been a year and a quarter, and a year ago May that it came out. And I'm amazed across Lynda and LinkedIn, lynda.com and linkedin.com, it became, I think it's like over 160,000 views now, which kind of blows my little mind. And
I watched it.
Right? I mean, it's such a gift to be able to get your content out in the world in such a bigger way. I think my book has done fine, but I'm not selling 160,000 copies of my book, right? So this idea of being able to spread this and getting notes like every day practically from people who are taking this course just brings so much joy to me. And the new course just came out about 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago now. And so that one is my newest content. And that was I felt like I needed to take a big leap this year and put my new content out in the world, because unlike with the first content where I'd been, kind of beating it up and testing it in a lot of workshops and whatever, I didn't this time. I decided to put it out first as a course. And so this one's about how do organizations become thought leaders. And that is, yeah, so that's really my new area. This idea of being an individual is really important, but now many people who are individual thought leaders are being hired within their groups to put their company on the map or their department on the map. And so it is, or their organization. And so that's with the new content. While there is some overlap to the first course, it is a new set of skills and a new framework around that.
Okay, great. So are you planning a book on this as well, or?
So I decided this one's going to be backwards. If the course does well, I'll write the book. So instead, the last time it was the book went okay, let's go and do the course. Now it's going to be the other way around. So it's only been out, as I said, maybe the end of May it came out. So I'm just in that. And it took us a month to kind of get all the bugs worked out. So I feel like it's really had about a 6-week life so far, and I'm just starting to market it, and they're just starting to market it. So we'll see. If it does well, I would say in another 6 to 8 months, I might get the energy to start doing another book. It is a big endeavor to do a book, as you know.
Yes, it is. Yeah. And so what would be some of your advice points? I have not seen this. It's so new that I haven't seen it. So can you give me
the big thing for me, the big thing for me is that, organizations need a point of view too. And for many organizations, they don't think that way, right? They have a lot of products and services they're talking about, but are they actually having a point of view in the world? And I think actually one of the things that's been helpful in the United States, at least, that's been reinforcing it is a couple of weeks ago, maybe just 2 or 3 weeks ago, this group called the Business Roundtable, which is a very, very influential business group here in the United States, put forward a sort of a manifesto calling on companies to get focused beyond their bottom line, which up until now, everything was always about the return on investment for the shareholders and not for anybody else. This now they're really trying to broaden that and say you need to be looking at all of your stakeholders, your community stakeholders, your team, the folks that you're serving, the customers, etc. And so what it did to me is it feels like it's a really beautiful opening for people, for my content, because my content is about, if you are going to take a stand in your community, if you are going to be of service to your own employees and their causes and what they care about, you need some strategies on how to do that. And so my course is about the piece. So first one piece, sort of a third, is about this idea of how do you create a point of view, how do you create that internal set of language and agreed upon terms and terminologies that you're all going to use. How do you sort of create I like to say, so that we're all singing out of the same songbook, like how do you create the songbook? So that's sort of the first third. The second third is really about how do you think about the talent within your organization. And for me, for so many years now, we've been talking about leadership development. I think we need to be thinking about how do we do thought leadership development. So what if we created a structure to actually develop thought leaders, help them to get better as writers and speakers, help them to be articulate in advocating big ideas, help them to actually create a place within their organization where they can come together and help one another on content. So I've got a lot of ideas in that. And then my third category, so the last third of the content, is around this idea of how do you advocate with others? How do you create an ecosystem of people who are working with you to move forward a big idea, whether you're working on Black Lives Matter or you're working on, clean water in your neighborhood, or whether you're working on, immigration issues. I don't care what your cause is, but you can't really do that effectively alone. And so if you are going to be taking a stand about a big idea, and I'm advocating that organizations should be taking a stand in order to move things forward, how do you do that? So that's sort of the last third of the book, is about how do we create advocacy together? How do we create coalitions? How do we think about legislation together? How do we advocate for creating a movement or being out there in a bigger way, as the Shabanis of the world, et cetera? So I had some fun with this because there's very few really good examples of organizations who are doing this. So I feel like it's 7 years ago when I was first writing my first book, when there wasn't a ton of really great examples of sort of day-to-day people, average people doing this kind of thought leadership. Now I think there's a ton of them, but I always like to be a little bit ahead of the curve. And so I think the same thing with this organizational thought leadership. I'm one of the few talking about it, but I think in the next 5 years, we'll see that more companies are realizing the importance of this. And the few that I was able to find as good examples, fortunately, LinkedIn was actually one of them. The few that I was able to find were very excited about talking to me about it, because they felt like nobody was really paying attention to what they were doing in the way as they were paying attention to the outcome, but they weren't paying attention to the process. So the fact that I would come in and interview them about their process, they were like, yeah, we totally want to talk to you about it. So I had a lot of fun doing this course, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I recently was given a handbook from a consulting company, their thought leadership manual, 80-page PowerPoint, a lot of interesting ideas. But it's such a massive organization, that many of the people doing things, writing, doing the type of activities that could lead to thought leadership don't even know that this resource exists for them, and they're inside their own company. So it's hard to get the framework right for imparting that knowledge. And then, of course, carving out time is also a problem, so that the people in organizations can actually have time to think about what it is they want to have an opinion on, and then be able to execute on it. Yeah. So these are, I'll plan to address some of those points in my book as well. I do
even figuring out like who the right people are. So I spent a lot of time as I was developing the course thinking, like, there is two different parts of thought leadership in organizations, right? There's the individuals who you want to encourage to be thought leaders, but then there's also the team of people who help them. And sometimes that is the same people, like you're trying to help each other because there's no team. But if there is a team, like who are the right people, and what should you be looking for in hiring them, and how should you structure that team, and what resources do they need, and where do they report? All of that is all new. I felt, even as I was developing the content in that area, that this is changing really rapidly. So it's always hard in my case, and I'm sure for a lot of your folks, to put that stake in the ground and say this is how it should be, because we are not expecting that it's going to stay the same. And so I struggle putting this is what it should be. So anyway, I kind of gave people a few different ideas of how it could be versus this is one way to do it.
Then what is the role of the communications department then in generating thought leadership materials?
So I think it depends on the organization, but if I believe, and my point of view is, it's done right, you need separate teams, because the communication department is always going to be pulled in. Oh, you've got a speech to write, or oh, we've got a new product launch, or whatever, right? And so you are just never going to have the focus and the consistency of thought leadership if you expect that same team to be doing both. Mm-hmm. So I believe that in fact, I believe the thought leadership team should even be separate from, and maybe even in a separate reporting structure, because this is, if the thought leadership team is not reporting pretty close to the CEO or to the CEO, it often will not happen. If you don't have CEO buy-in to thought leadership, you just might as well close up shop. And if it's not both believed in and supported and advocated for by the CEO, you're not going to get too far. And I think it needs to be separate, so that if it's not under any one team's purview to be able to pull. Now, if one product team owns the thought leadership team, guess which team is going to get all the thought leadership, right? So it's this idea of creating a reporting structure that these people sort of sit to the side and have the purview overall, because they need to be working with, LinkedIn, I thought it was really interesting. They structure it so that they actually interface a lot with the sales team, so that if there's a big client as LinkedIn, they actually, and they sell mostly to HR, they want to bring those HR people in to be thought leaders themselves. So couldn't we create a conference in which we feature a bunch of HR leaders, and we pick some of our big clients, of course, to put on that stage? Yes, absolutely, you should, but not to the detriment of the fact that their ideas are terrible, right? So you have to play this a little carefully, and you can't do that if that person's under sales. Under sales, it would always be that the client's going to get to be front and center, even if their ideas are poorly articulated. So you need the strength of a separate reporting relationship.
Okay. And how close is the thought leadership team to the research division? I tend to think in terms of structures of consulting companies or very knowledge-based companies. You may be talking about different types of companies that are product heavy or what have you. I tend to visualize service companies. So,
well, the service companies is exactly right, Ray. It's really where it all began. I mean, if you really want the best of the best, you've got to look at the McKinseys of the world and think about that is where it all started. Good thought leadership was integrated with research there, and it is in service businesses. I think that's critical. I don't think in product businesses it's going to be structured the same way. And so I think that's part of what the struggle is that we can't really justify that research as easily in a product company. And so usually you have to pull those resources from other places. If, on the other hand, you can figure it out that this thought leadership is going to lead to good things for your company and you do invest there, I think those people need to be integrated right into that thought leadership team, because that is, what was it somebody I interviewed said, I've got a blog that this guy that I interviewed from Vistage, he was wonderful. He said, thought leadership without research is just your opinion. Like, yes, it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I since I focus a lot on articles, I do use that key phrase that you use, or a body of work, right? So, a 750 word article for LinkedIn could be a thought leadership piece, but more likely it's going to make up a body of work that becomes that. And yeah, sometimes it's not every subject lends itself to research or to statistics, but I think if it's well argued and well set up and shows that you've taken the idea and spun it in a new way or applied it or turned it upside down and taken it apart, then it can be a contribution to the conversation and therefore in the direction of thought leadership, or perhaps it is. Yeah, I like that. Okay, great. And so what about the workshops? And I noticed something on your website where people can join in like a month or weeks long journey and work with other people. And I assume you're the facilitator in this group, and it's a workshop for thought leadership. Is that?
Yeah, I'm not doing that right this minute. I did do one a year ago. I do have some people signed up for it, but I ended up taking a engagement with one of my clients that's sort of a 50% time engagement, so I don't have time to do that right now, and I know I will come back to it probably in 6 months. The good news of those is that you do get that support of one another, but it is also the hardest part to structure because everybody's so busy doing their own stuff and getting them to support one another can be challenging. I started it from my class at Stanford, that we had this idea of the tribe, and we put the students into tribes and they supported one another in a really beautiful way, and it gave me that sense that this could be possible. But if you're at Stanford Business School, you're committing to being part of groups. That is the whole construct of how you learn there. And so it's a different model. And of course there are students, and it's a 10-week class and then it's over, versus if you're signing up and paying money, you really are coming there as an individual looking for help for yourself. But I got to say, it's harder to get them to help one another. So I'm still playing with the model. I will say it isn't perfect yet.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. All right. Well, you've given me so much information, so many great ideas to share. I actually feel like it's kind of come to a natural end. Is there anything else that you'd like to add or say or
No, I just wish you all the best, and I hope you'll send me what you finally get done. And I'm happy to be a part of it, and thank you for being a fan and spreading my word out, my ideas out in the world, because honestly, that's really what this is all about, isn't it? So we can all help one another to spread big ideas. So thank you, and keep going.
You as well. I appreciate it. I wish you a good day, Denise.
Take care now. Bye-bye.
Ciao, ciao.